And how have you and yours been holding up during these crazy times, brother?
It's been real difficult because unfortunately I've had family friends pass away from COVID-19. So when people talk about, it's tough, but when people talk about that, it's not real. And when I've known the number of people who are friends of family members pass away, that's just unfortunate and it's sad. So that's one portion of it, right? It's the COVID-19. It's keeping yourself safe. It's making sure you're taking your vitamins, your vitamins A, C, and D, and your turmeric and all that stuff that helps against the inflammation. But then it's also what's going on in the world right now, and with racism and fighting, the infighting between different races. And I try to get out on the front lines and I go march and I try to get in front of people and get in the community and talk about what people want. And it's just the same thing everyone else wants. You want to take care of your family. You want to generate enough revenue or income for you to buy a house and maybe send your kids to college, maybe educate yourself. And also from the police brutality thing is the biggest problem is the good cops aren't doing enough of telling on the bad cops. And when we get to the point where the good cops are telling on the bad cops and everyone's getting held accountable, this stuff could go away. Because nowadays, depending on what city you are, you have those body cameras. And if you turn off the body camera, a lot of times it's automatic suspension. And if you're known for doing it multiple times, then you're terminated. So when we get serious about that piece of it, that's when I think things will start to get better. So people are still marching. People are, unfortunately, there are some still riots and some looting, but the key is we as human beings are now being heard, and now it's time to take it to the next level is what do we do next in putting process and policy together. Now, I know that, President Barack Obama had some things around policy and the way police process of policing was going to change, and then when the new president, when Donald Trump came in, he changed that. And that's something that some of the police departments still move forward with, that higher level of monitoring folks and policing them. But some police stations who were saying, hey, we don't have to abide by this law because now President Trump has rolled it back, they have just decided, like, hey, we're just going to do status quo and work as what we've always done. So what my hope is that some of this thing gets cleaned up. We're going to be able to help people. We're going to provide people with opportunity for economic growth, and then at the same time making sure that we are monitoring the police so we don't run into those type of things that have happened, So it's unfortunate.
Oh, very, very unfortunate, and I'm very sorry that you lost family and loved ones to COVID-19.
I appreciate that.
It's so difficult because you got a huge chunk of this population that thinks it's a hoax. They echo the rhetoric of I like to call him the orange orifice in office, because that's what he is. He's a fucking orange asshole, and now he wants to sacrifice our kids. First, they wanted to sacrifice the elderly. Remember, they wanted that big push to open the economy at the expense of the elderly. Oh, don't worry, they'll do it for their grandkids. They'll be willing to do it. Now, they want to send our kids into a dangerous, possibly deadly situation during the middle of a global pandemic, in the epicenter of a global pandemic. It's insanity, brother. It really is.
I agree with you 100%. I think the challenge is all of these folks are being released from jail because the COVID-19 is dangerous, but we're going to send our children back into that environment. And I think what happens is people are looking from the standpoint getting children back to school so parents can get back to work, and that's going to continue to grow the economy. Since we've come far back, we've gone backwards. But the problem is we're going to see folks young people get very sick. And if those young people get very sick, they bring that disease over to their family members and they get sick, and you're going to see a spike. So I think the best thing that we could do or should do, and I know it's very difficult, is try to figure out a way to make sure that we are having children doing schoolwork at home. if at all possible, because sending kids back to school and that, well, we don't even have our arms around the numbers. At least if we would have dialed back those numbers and they would have been low, hey, we're prepared to send kids back to school because the numbers are so low. But it's just not the case, and it just depends on where you live, right? If you're living in California or Florida and New York, and now it's like it's moved on to places like Arizona, in Texas, where those numbers have shot up, it's real difficult to send your children back to school. I know, my children are older, so I don't have that. I don't have to work with that dilemma. I mean, one of my children's in college, the other one's graduated and looking to go to graduate school, but it's definitely a lot of online school work can be done from a collegiate perspective. But when you're talking about elementary school and middle school and high school, sending young people into that environment, and it's kind of drawing a line in the sand that either these kids go back or we're going to take away your funding. I mean, you're setting folks up for a disaster where people can lose their lives because we're just trying to push, because everyone's about the economy, and that's important. But if we're well over 100,000 people have lost their lives because of COVID-19, well, what if that number goes up, 3 times? What if we get to the 350, 400 and push our way to 500,000? And that's what some of the experts are saying. If we open up the floodgates and go back to school and try to do things the way they were before, that number is going to shoot up to the 500,000 mark. And then you're not just talking about, you're talking about very young people potentially losing their lives. And that's, anyone who lost their lives to COVID-19, it's unfortunate. But when you're pushing people to go out there to do it, that is definitely a challenge. And it's definitely something that we don't want. As the American people, we definitely don't want that situation.
No, exactly. And there will be no economy to grow if there's no people. That's what they don't understand.
Absolutely.
Too.
I agree with you.
Yeah, when they're not wearing the masks, they don't. It shows the inconsideration, because I wear a mask. Number one, if I get it, I'm done for. But also, in case I'm carrying the disease and don't know it, I don't want to spread it to somebody and find out that I caused somebody's death.
Yeah.
It's called consideration. And these goofs who drink the Kool-Aid, these cultists is like what I like to call them. They just don't get it, man. It's like they're beyond reach, and right now they're participating in their own genocide. Trump made them sign waivers to go to the rally because he knew they'd get sick. He knew some could die. This is Jonestown 2020. It really is.
Well, I mean, it's definitely people who blindly follow what the president says is confusing to me. I think, when until someone knows, like I said, I've had family, friends pass away from the disease. So I understand it and I feel it. And if you're a person who says, hey, I don't know anybody who's passed away from it or anyone who's had it, you start to have this feeling of invincibility, right? Like you're thinking along the lines of like, hey, this thing is a hoax because I don't know anybody who's gotten it. No one around here is sick. Well, when you start to know people that have it or know people that are sick and that may have passed away, or maybe they're at the realm of being on a ventilator and then been close to losing their lives, or they're at the cusp of possibly dying, but they come back, then it opens your eyes and you start thinking about it a little bit differently. I think that the more people understand that this disease, it's crazy because you could have the disease now and have no symptoms, or what they call asymptomatic, or you could be on your deathbed, or you could die. You're playing Russian roulette with your life when you're talking about COVID-19. So yeah, if you get it and good for you, you don't have anything but the sniffles and a little bit of a cough, great. But it could go all the way to giving it to somebody where they're on a ventilator or where they lose their life. And that's the scary part of this disease. It just depends on how your body reacts to it.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely. You can't be arrogant and think, oh, this won't happen to me. Italy, I commend them. They were like the epicenter for a while. They were hit real bad, and now, I mean, their numbers are so low. That's why Europe, they won't let us come over there. The Bahamas won't let us go over there.
I know I was planning a big trip to head over there. In fact, I'm
man.
supposed to be there right now, and because it's the difficult thing to not be there, because I had a long vacation plan there, but nobody from Europe wants us because whether we like it or not, we as Americans, and I'm just generalizing, we're cavalier. Like, we think we can live through anything and do anything, and we're Americans, and that's probably a big part of the problem, right? So instead of in other countries where they're like, hey, we're going to follow the rule, our arrogance says, hey, we're American, you can't tell me to wear a mask, it's un-American. Well, we've gone through this. This is why I'm not overly worried about, eventually we'll turn this around. My fear is that we won't turn it around quick enough. But if you think about years ago, and you may not be old enough to remember this, when they were talking about the seatbelt law. Well, it was like no one wanted to do the seatbelt law. It was un-American. We should be able to wear our seatbelts or not. And now everyone wears seatbelts because it's the right thing to do. And I think in this situation it's the right thing to do. Put a mask on, wash your hands, be very, very diligent about making sure you're keeping your distance and your space. And I think, if you can't, wear gloves. Like, if I go to the gas station, I put on gloves or the grocery store and put on gloves and use them, and then I dispose of them. And please, listeners, dispose of them in a trash can, because oftentimes I see people's gloves on the ground, and I find myself putting on gloves to pick those up and putting them in the trash. But if people just did that and were very conscientious of people's space, personal space, I think you would see a significant difference in our fight against it. But it's the cavalier attitude of, hey, I don't have to wear a mask if I don't feel like it. I should be able to go where I want, and being so, honestly, just not thinking of others and inconsiderate of others by just saying, hey, I'm not going to wear a mask. Because at the end of the day, wear a mask. Like, if you can't wear a mask, don't stay home. That's the deal. Like, don't go to your grocery store. If you don't want to wear a mask, don't go to the grocery store or the retail store. Just stay home. Order online. Nowadays you can get your food and your groceries and anything you want from Amazon can come to your doorstep. Just don't leave your house. And if you're going to leave your house, put your mask on.
Respect the other people out there. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think the people who think it's a hoax have not lost anyone yet.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I remember Scarface. He both of his kidneys are gone. He's getting dialysis every day. This. A lot of people have passed away, unfortunately. And again, my apologies that you've had to endure that in your family.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's really sad and it's unfortunate, and that's why when anyone tells me something's not real, or someone tries to tell me, oh, this is a hoax, I just say, look, until you've known a family friend that has passed away from this, or multiple people have passed away from this, you have no idea. And the problem is, like I said before, you can either have no symptoms, you could have the sniffles and a cough, and the next day you feel like Superman or Superwoman, or you could be really sick and in the hospital, and nobody wants that.
Yeah, absolutely. On to some happier stuff, though. I know you got a lot of things in the works. Actually, tomorrow, you're going to be on, which will be the 29th, you're going to be on the BET for the No Limit documentary, man. Can you talk about that, man? What was that experience like?
Well, it was just, I had been called a couple times, and I kind of, missed the BET folks, and they finally caught up with me, and they said, hey, we're going to do this 5-part docuseries on No Limit Records. And, there's a whole story about No Limit from the foundation of, the multiple albums that were put out before there was the even local prominence, and then moving from local to regional, then regional to national. And the story, people want to hear the story. People want to hear about our relationship, my relationship with Master P, our relationship with St. Charles, how St. Charles literally taught us all, myself and E40 and JT the Bigger Figure and P and all of us, the music industry and what does it take to put together albums and distribution and doing one sheets and making sure that you're driving your pre-orders up so you can make sure distributors pay you on time and have multiple albums in your pipeline so when the distributor's slow to pay you. So it's just really about, the story, telling the story of how do we change the industry? How do we change the industry independently and drive people to the retail stores to buy these albums and put together double albums and put together movies and do this whole promotional tour to really get people excited about the records. And then, signing a distribution deal, where you own your masters and you're driving revenue and you're not signing an artist deal. Like all of those things are something that's completely different. And there have always been folks that have had distribution deals, but the difference is the amount of artists that we had, the amount of albums, doing the West Coast Bad Boys, doing the Down South Hustlers, the 99 Ways to Die, the Ghetto's Trying to Kill Me, putting all of those albums together and in quick time. We but we recorded the TRU album in 2.5 weeks. So it was like we recorded it in 2.5 weeks, and then it took us about a week to master it, and then it was ready. So when you're doing these albums in 2 to 3 weeks, and you're constantly in the studio, and you're constantly coming up with concepts of what the album cover is going to look like, and how we're going to go to market, and what that go-to-market strategy is like, it's a game changer, and the world wants to hear it. Like when you literally take an artist who is the hardest working guy you'll probably ever meet, wasn't the most talented rapper, but was really driven by being successful, and you work with someone like St. Charles, who's a real OG, who started his career as a distributor when he was 16 years old. He was going to jukeboxes and placing records in jukeboxes, and learning how to run this record company. And I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I would owe my success to St. Charles because he taught me so much about dealing with distributors and being independent and what that's like, and making sure you own your masters and not giving away the farm, and just making sure that if you're going to do a deal, have enough albums in your pipeline so the distributor's always ready to pay you. So you're not sitting around waiting for a record. Because a lot of record companies back then, or independent labels, they'd have 1 or 2 records or albums they put out, and then they were having trouble getting paid from the distributor. Well, it's a little bit better situation if you have multiple albums, because the distributor wants the next album because you've already pre-promoted, and you may have a pre-order of 50 to 75,000 albums, and they know, like, man, once they push 75,000 albums through their tunnel, they know they're gonna pop an album on Billboard, and they're going to be responsible as a distributor of having a Billboard charting album coming through their funnel. So those are the type of things that we did, and BET wanted to tell the story. So going from there to making music and movies, and then beyond, is really what people want to talk about. So the Snoop Dogg deal and what that looked like, and then doing the multiple movies, and then at one time No Limit Records was the largest independent record company in the entire world. And then also seeing after that what happened, and some of the challenges that happened towards the end of that run of No Limit Records being very popular and very successful. And then also those of us who ran No Limit or worked at No Limit or an artist at No Limit, how we have kind of moved on, and we had our own success with our own record labels as artists or whatever. That's a really good story. And it just sharing the information of, No Limit wasn't just one person. It was a group of people who were passionate about being successful and had a lot of ideas to take No Limit to the next level.
And that's a good thing because you never get to hear about the people behind the scenes, like you mentioned about St. Charles. That guy is a legend. He's responsible for so much in the music industry. Like you said, going back to the days of jukeboxes. What was it like, learning from him, and what would you say was the number one thing that you really picked up from St. Charles?
Well, the amazing thing about Saint, he was just a wealth of information. Now, one thing about Saint always is good about, setting you up for success and making sure you're doing everything necessary for you to get your album out there. And I think the biggest thing that I learned from him is just, like I said before, having multiple albums ready to go and marketing those albums inside the album covers. So if you picked up an album from No Limit Records, you would see all of the other up and coming albums. You pick up a Me and Mine Entertainment album that had King George or Little Troy on it with Shortstop Records, you would see the other albums that were coming or movies that were coming. And that's a big thing that I learned from Saint. Is always have a good pipeline full of music and making sure that when you're putting these one sheets together, you're putting all the information possible about who's affiliated with the record, who do you have as a guest appearance, what sort of concerts or shows that you have, and what sort of promotion you're going to do. So, St. Charles is just a wealth of information. There is no E40 without St. Charles. St. Charles literally taught E40 everything he knows about putting out records. He taught me, he taught Master P, he taught Sibo, JT the Bigger Figure, all of the records that he had come out through Solar Music Group. He taught us all what does it take for us to be independent and get that done and get that out there. And none of us needed, it was great some of us went and signed other deals and got some money and did some things, but he always showed us that we could go independent and sell a lot of records. We just have to be willing to work hard, get out on the road, and meet people and get people to believe in what we're doing and how we're doing it. So I enjoyed my time, with St. Charles. In fact, St. Charles introduced me to Master P. St. Charles is the one that said, hey, I think, P, you and Tobin, you need to connect. You guys need to get together and work on something together because I think both of you guys could do something special. And that's how how we met each other. So, I'd say I owe a lot to Saint as far as teaching me what I needed to do and what I didn't need to do and what I should stay away from in order to have success with my record.
Yeah, very, very valuable. Now, you were a DJ at first, were you not?
Yes, so I used to mix. I used to mix at clubs up in Washington State. I learned a lot about mixing from Nasty Ness Rodriguez, who was at Nasty Mix Records who was partners with Sir Mix-a-Lot. So I learned a lot from him.
Criminal Nation.
Yeah, absolutely. So I learned a lot from Nasty Ness about mixing and getting parties going, and then also transitioning to radio. So I was, mixing on the radio. I had a partner of mine I used to do a radio show with called the Rap Attack up in Spokane, Washington. It was Spokane's only rap show, and his name was Grand Mixer GMS. So Grand Mixer GMS, he was another guy I learned from about mixing and really mixing on the radio, and whether you mix live or whether you use a 4-track or 8-track and really expand on the sound and what you're doing. So yeah, I started off as a DJ, in the clubs, and then doing radio, and Grand Mixer GMS and I would do shows and interviews and get dropped from all kinds of artists, and that's how I met. I was in the Bay Area and I met St. Charles, and Saint just kind of turned me on to all of these artists. So I was playing the E40s of the world, and I was playing some of the old stuff from Master P, like Before Mama's Bad Boy and then Into Mama's Bad Boy. And then once we connected, then that's when we start talking about the West Coast Bad Boys and the 99 Ways to Die, and coming up with concepts of how we're going to really market and really do something big. So I always tell people when they ask me, Master P had the drive like you would never believe. I could tell him, when we were together, I could call him and say, hey, we need to go to Japan tomorrow, and he'd say, you got my passport, and what time are you picking me up? That's just the kind of drive that guy had. So, putting together records and all of that stuff. So I will just say that, the enjoyment that I had of making records, and whether it's producing them or whether than mixing them as a DJ, I mean, all that stuff was coincided, it worked together, and it all coincides with wanting to put a record out. So for me, I never, a lot of people would say to me, you got to go be an intern and work for MCA or go work for Universal. And I was always like, well, why would I want to do that when I can produce my own records or produce my own movies? And it took me meeting St. Charles, and then St. Charles introducing P and I together in order for us to to really, build a good foundation and help a record company grow.
Yeah. St. Charles, he had that gift. I mean, I talked to him many times. He had that ability, like you said, to pair people up who knew that they could help each other. And essentially, when before P got with you, I believe he was in a minute doing his thing over there.
Yeah. So
I
don't know if you know this, but sorry to cut you off, but he had put multiple albums out in In a Minute record, and he there wasn't any success. So it kept on.
Yeah.
Those records kept on coming out, but it wasn't it never really went more than a couple thousand copies, if that, being sold. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's what I was going to say. Basically, he was putting out records over at In a Minute, Mama's Bad Boy, Get Away Clean, and the early TRU stuff, Real Untouchables. But when you and him hooked up, it was like those were the two ingredients that you needed to kind of escalate it to the next level. And then you guys started getting real successful. When did you come on board? What album were you first with No Limit?
Well, it was before the Ghettos Trying to Kill Me, because that's really when Saint connected us, and it was the whole concept of telling the story. So if you listen to any album before that, there wasn't really a story. It was just songs put together that make an album. And if you listen to the Ghettos Trying to Kill Me, you listen to 99 Ways to Die, you listen to even the West Coast Bad Boys. Even though the West Coast Bad Boys was a compilation, it tells a story. And from the beginning of the album to the end of the album. And once we got down with, okay, we want to tell a story, we want to let people know, whether it's visually through our album covers or through the music, that's when things picked up for us. And that's when I kind of came on board. And I think what I tried to do, I had a lot of different ideas about growing the business, but I laid a foundation of how do we show ourselves in a professional manner, and how do we get in front of the right people and get in front of the right retail stores with the assistance of St. Charles to talk to the Violet Browns of the world, to get them to believe in us enough. And at the time, Violet Brown was at Warehouse Music, to get her and other buyers at Musicland and Sam Goody and those retailers and Tower to believe in us enough to bring in enough units to get us on the shelf. Because ultimately, we knew if we had enough albums on the shelves in the retail stores, we're going to sell, because we believed in our product and we believed in the story we were telling. And that's really what we did. That's really I think that was really the catalyst for us, is telling the right story, having the right sound, having, enough pre-orders out there, so financially we were bringing in money, so we weren't struggling or stressing too much, but we were still driving enough revenue, enough units out there to generate the revenue we needed to expand, right? Doing the West Coast Bad Boys, getting the most popular rappers on the West Coast and putting them all on one album, and then having Master P being the leader of that, by saying Master P presents the West Coast Bad Boys, and having all the different rappers from all over the West Coast who are hot on that is really what took us to the next level. Because back then, before, people were doing compilations, but they were kind of oldies but goodies, right? They might have been some old rap tunes that they put on together, but no one had really, other than, NWA, right? When they started the whole NWA before they formed the group, no one had really put together a compilation that was new artists or established artists and a bunch of really new music. And by having the most popular rappers in different parts of the West Coast, and then putting Master P on there as the leader, that's what really took it to the next level. When if you have 10 or 20,000 fans, and I have 10 or 20,000 fans, and JT has fans, and Rappin' Forte has fans, and then you add all of them together, next you know it, you've probably sold 250,000 records, and then you're trying to push yourself to go gold independently, and you're driving a lot of dollars, you're bringing a lot of dollars in, and everybody gets what they want, and they get turned on to a new artist. So if there was someone who liked Forte, who didn't know about SIBO, wow, they got a SIBO record on there, and they can check out SIBO. And then when you see all of these powerful artists are all kind of coming under the West Coast Bad Boys, who Master P is presenting that to the world, that put him at the top echelon of being the hottest artist on the West Coast just by doing the West Coast Bad Boys. And everything we did after that was like, oh my God, I need to get that the 99 Ways to Die, the original cover, Master P on the cover with two guns, smoking a cigar. That it blew people's mind, because that's when they said, okay, Master P's leading the West Coast Bad Boys. He's got this 99 Ways to Die, One Way to Live album, and then the rest was history. We got better producers. We were working with folks like Ken Franklin, a.k.a. K-Lou. We were working with Larry D. We were working with Al Eaton, who was, Too Short's producer, and that's when you start saying, wow, these guys, they've taken their game to the next level.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I remember the explosion too. It just started to really take off. I remember seeing about a video on BET. I was like, wow, man, this is a huge movement right here. And the good thing about it too is it was kind of like West Coast Bad Boys or Down South Hustlers. It was kind of like the review section of a Murder Dog magazine. Like you said, you had people, from representing Oakland, Frisco, all over the place. On one project, you didn't have to go nowhere else. Well,
that was the hope. That was the hope we wanted. We wanted to build an album that had different people from different hoods, so people felt they got their money's worth. We were always about the value pack. When we did the Down South Hustlers, we wanted to get as many well-known artists as possible to put them on one album, and then have Master P be at the head of that, to get that done. So, you've got, a different sound on each album. So if you were into something particular, if you were into some balanced booty shaking music, you could get that. If you're looking for some real slow kind of something to mob to, you can listen to that. If you're looking for something hype, you can do that. You were looking up for some really gangster, shoot 'em up, bang bang stuff. We had that. So everyone could get a little something from that album, and you were getting turned on to an artist that you may not even really paid attention to. Like, we had CCG on that album. We had 20 to Life on that album. We had the Dayton Family on that album. We had 8 Ball NJG, PSK 13. Exactly. DJ Screw. There's so many artists that were on that album. It was phenomenal. And then you get, Pimp C produced some tracks on there, and Bun B, and we flew them out to California and recorded these albums. And then, then by that time we had already signed Moby Dick, we had signed KLC, we had signed Servon and Mia X. So we cranked out those records, and it was just, it was just one of those things that people they were waiting on, and they got the value pack, and they got their money's worth, and for us to be on the Billboard charts. So from the Ghettos Trying to Kill Me on, like every album we did was on the Billboard charts. And when you're on the Billboard charts, retailers want what's hot on the Billboard charts. So I even would tell artists, even today when artists talk to me, and they say, well, what should we do? Or I'm like, look, your number one goal right now, I don't care what you do, is get as many downloads or sales as it takes to get you on the Billboard chart. If you can get on the Billboard chart, top 200 or top 100 R&B or top 200 pop chart, you are going to set yourself up for success. And you need to know what that number is. Is it 10,000 downloads in a week? Is it 20,000 downloads? Or, back then it was, we know we had to get to 8 to 10,000, sales for a week in order to get to crack the top 200. And the goal is, if we can get the top 200 and we can maintain that for many weeks, then when we drop the next album, and if you look at all those albums, it would be like from the West Coast Bad Boys or from the Down South Hustlers or from TRU album or whatever, people would automatically say, hey, I love the TRU album. I got to check out Mr. Servon. Or I love TRU. Let me get Silk the Shocker. Let me get Big Ed. Let me, and obviously Master P was at the forefront of all of these things. When the Master P album dropped, it was hot.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Huge, I'm saying, sales. I mean, you guys were just hitting Billboard left and right, and everybody was selling that you guys dropped on that label. So much talent.
So folks have things like vodka, flavored vodkas. So what I try to do is a low sugar sugar content, less than 7 grams or less than 3 grams of sugar, but also a little bit less than 7% alcohol, where people could, enjoy, be real smooth, and something they can enjoy with different flavors that no one else does. So we do a raspberry dragon fruit psycho cider. We do a kiwi Herman, which is kiwi lime. We have an Illuminati, which is a lemon drop cider. So we're doing things that, flavors that no one else is doing, and just keeping that sugar content low. So I'm excited about it. So, we were doing real well because we were doing on-premise only kegs. But unfortunately with COVID-19, restaurants and bars, especially out here on the West Coast in California, were closing down. So what we've done is revamped, and now we're in the can business. So we should have cans ready to go, mainly in California now, and then eventually expanding across the United States. But we're really focused on getting our Mother of Dragons, which is the raspberry dragon fruit hard cider, and the kiwi Herman, which is the kiwi lime hard cider, out to all of California, hopefully in the next 4 to 6 weeks, and we are ready to rock and roll. So I'm really excited about it. I enjoy making the cider and working with a really great company called Hidden Star. Those guys are really awesome. I put together what I think is a really good formula, and people, everywhere it was at, it was pretty much those kegs were selling out quickly. Now we're just expanding that on to cans, and it's going to be exciting, man.
That's awesome. Congratulations, man. I know you're putting in work, and this shows off your skills in another area. Same thing you did in the rap game. I assume you've applied to Psycho Cider.
Absolutely. So, promoting each flavor separately, doing more digital marketing now because we didn't have digital marketing back then, but also having events pre-COVID-19. We did a Psycho Fest in the Bay Area that was really big. We were doing different parties, basically monthly, having artists perform, and we were excited about Psycho Fest 2, which was going to be big with multiple artists from hip-hop to 80s cover bands to DJs. So everything is about events and getting people through the doors and getting people excited about the gear, the hats, the T-shirts, and, the paddle boards, and, nothing's off limits when it comes to Psycho Cider and trying to promote the brand and promote who we are. So, it's been exciting, and I've been doing the same kind of strategy of creating this awareness of who we are. And, we tell the story. We tell the story about how you can get something, really light, crisp, and refreshing and smooth, and not too sweet and not bitter like some other ciders are.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what's up, man. I wish you nothing but success with that. And hopefully, once this pandemic is over, I know you want to go out there and do some more events, and you know, just get it out to the world. Our brother Sin from France, he's up wee hours of the morning over there to talk to you, Tobin. Stan, are you there, brother?
What's up,
Yes,
Stan? How you doing, man? How's it going in France? You being safe?
Oh yes, it's been good. You come in France, yeah, one time. Hi, legendary Tobin.
Absolutely.
You sound like you're in a birdhouse back there.
It's like it, yeah, exactly.
Oh man,
I got one myself.
I'm outside of home, so there's some birds here. Birds in the kitchen like Sibo.
Oh yeah, right.
The birds in the kitchen. That's a good one, Sid.
Yeah. Can you tell us about the members of the real Untouchables, the earlier members, like Big Ed, of course, but you got also Gangsta T and Gary G, the earlier members back the day.
Yeah. You know, when you think about those guys, you know, this is post B and obviously King George. You know, really the focus was getting all those guys together, and they were a group. You know, everybody was like a family, and releasing those records was popular. You know, and the goal was to, you know, Cali G to have an album, Big Ed to have an album, Gangsta T to have an album, you know, and then, you know, King George to have an album. And, you know, it didn't come to fruition. Big Ed did have a solo album and had some success before he left No Limit, and unfortunately he passed away. And then, you know, King George and I had a lot of success with the King George albums. Every album that we did with King George was on the Billboard charts that came from me and Minor Entertainment. So there was that success. And Cali G has worked on projects and featured on projects and has had albums. So, you know, there's been that success of a great foundation of people who started out with No Limit Records in some capacity and went on to had their own individual success. You know, Trey 8 was somebody who you know was on the Down South Hustlers and also had his own solo album. You know, through his record label Smoke One, as well as, you know, No Limit Records, and he had success on his own. You know, up until the time of his passing, he's always had hot albums that were really successful. You know, so when you think about all of that talent that kind of brought together to make No Limit Records, and each one of those guys was passionate about their skill set and what they could do and what they brought to the table, there was some excitement around that. And I think that was, you know, it's unfortunate that some of those albums didn't come out on No Limit, but I think, you know, the albums that didn't were successful because, you know, those guys stood on their own 2 feet and they kind of drove people to the retail stores to check them out, and they drove people to shows to come see them do shows. Like, you know, someone like, you know, King George that would do a show in front of, you know, 5,000 people, you know, that would pay, you know, $20-$30 to come see him perform. So there is some excitement around that, and we did projects with, we did projects with Cali G, including the Players and Hustlers 1 and 2, and, you know, War Casualties, the King George album, and Concrete Jungle, and albums like that had a lot of success that, you know, Cali G was a part of, and you know, King and Cali still, you know, work together and do projects together to this day.
Yeah, absolutely. Sin, you got another one, brother?
Yes, sir. Can you tell us about the album Getaway Clean from Master P and how it was to work on it?
Well, I mean, ultimately, you know, Getaway Clean was a solid record, but I think it was, you know, if you listen to it, it was kind of very raw. You know, it wasn't as polished. So, and I think a lot of that had to do with, you know, Master P was trying to figure out what his sound was going to be. And he was always kind of trying to figure out what he wanted to be and how he wanted to be and what that sound was and what his moniker was going to be. And I think, with the different production and trying to have a different sound for each record to go on this album, I think it was kind of visionary, but at the same time didn't show, exactly the direction that was going to take place. So I think as you move from there to as you start getting into The Ghetto's Trying to Kill Me and you start getting into 99 Ways to Die, you're starting to hear a kind of its own sound, a variety of producers putting the records together, because you don't want to have one sound on an album. So a lot of times when you have multiple producers, you have a more national sounding record instead of a local sounding record. So Getaway Clean was, a solid record, but it was more of a local record. And until 99 Ways to Die, that's when you became regional. And then when you focus on, The Ghetto's Trying to Kill Me, that was the regional. But then by the time 99 Ways and True and those albums start coming out, then you've got a national sound with a national audience, and you're building that foundation for success to grow from there.
Yeah. We had, thanks to you, we had King George on the show. It was dope to actually chop it up with him because you never really get to hear from him anymore. Have you done any projects with him recently or plan on doing anything with him?
No, I mean, we haven't, I haven't done an album. The last album I did with King was that hit Billboard charts was the Hardest Hits 2000 album back in 2000. And I didn't, I haven't done anything with him since then. I know he's working on, we've talked a few times and he's working on putting together a movie and he's working on doing some other projects. But, nothing's in the works. You never want to say never because, when pen hits paper, the agreements from people and money changes hands, you never know. But, we haven't really talked specifically about doing, anything with King George and TC getting together to do a project. Now, I know right now he's doing some stuff with some jazz stuff with his late, great uncle, Henry Butler, the jazz musician. I know he's doing some projects around there, and I know we've talked about doing some stuff with that. But as far as a hip-hop record, we haven't. But we did talk a little bit about, the movie and possibly doing some distribution and stuff like that. But no, we haven't talked specifically about doing another King George album yet.
Now with this, BET series coming out, were you able to, talk to Master P? And if so, did you guys talk about possibly doing anything in the future? Or?
No, I did not connect with P at all. They did everything separate. Like, Saint was interviewed and Snoop was interviewed and King was interviewed and Cali G and myself and so many people, Mia and all those folks, Servon and were all interviewed, but we were never together at the same time. So when they put this together, it kind of, it's a good flow to it from the little bit that I've had to see. I got the opportunity to see because I haven't seen the whole part and I haven't even seen really, the way it flows, but I've seen a little bit of the way they have it together, and it looks, it coincides all together. Everyone works together, but we were not all in the same space. Now, I did see K. Lou, and I did see St. Charles and talk to him, but those are the only folks that I really, really saw. So at this particular juncture, I would say no, but I will go back to what I said before. Yeah. You never say never. You never know what the future entails. I think this No Limit Chronicles is going to, bring a lot of things to the forefront. Some of it good, some of it probably not so good. Some of it paints us, the overall No Limit in a good light, and some of it probably doesn't. And I think it's good to tell the story. And as long as we tell the story, there's going to be avenues such as your show and other shows for people to have conversations around what happened at No Limit, and maybe there are things I try to, every time I've been on your show or every time we've had a conversation, I feel like, oh, I forgot to tell this story, or you bring out some information, or you ask me a question that gets me to talk about things that maybe I haven't thought about in a lot of years. And I think that's what's going to be exciting for people who don't know the story, because there's certain people that think they do know, but they have no idea of everything that took place and how we fought and struggled to get records mastered and to get vinyl done and to get on the road and be in some of the most difficult situations in the country and being in some of the hardest places to be in and some of the hoods and all of the things that it takes to build the foundation of doing an album. People are going to feel it and sense it, and I think it's important. And I think folks like Callie G and King George and St. Charles and you know, and as you talk, and K. Lou, and as you talk to these people who were all part of the success, it's good that everyone's going to be able to get an opportunity to tell their side of the story. And you never know how much of their side of the story is going to make it on screen, because sometimes there's just not enough time. I mean, it's great that there's 5-part series to this, but you know, you probably could do a 20-part series of this thing and still not hit all the information and talk about all of the people that were behind the scenes. Because I know Sonia C is in the docuseries as well, and Mia X, Ricky Williams is on the show, and Snoop's on the show. So there's so many people from different angles that are going to kind of tell their part of the No Limit story and how they became a part of, you know, what I would say changing history.
Yeah, absolutely. We saw this with Ruthless too. You know, when Straight Outta Compton came out, and you know, this generation discovered Eazy-E and Cube and Dre and everything, and it just exploded from there. And I hope it happens here as well. I'm sure it will. And then I also want to see it happen with Rap-A-Lot and Luke Records too. Those are the other independent labels that really had incredible stories. You know, guys who came from nothing. Luke was pressing records out of the back of his mother's house, and we all know Jay Prince's story, and you know, so it's going to be good to see these stories told. I think Sin has one more for you before we go, but I want to give you the floor after he comes on. Sin, you there, brother?
Yes, sir. Yes, can you tell us about the group's Fambam producers album Way to Will, and also Wet Boys? You got Spotty G, rest in peace in it, and Black Goody and T-Bone. The album Get Wet, you produced it too. Tell us about these two groups.
Well, yeah. So you know, Fam Bam Click was, you know, these guys were, you know, Crips. They were from South Central Los Angeles. Part of them, some of them lived in Compton, some of them lived in South Central. And I don't know if you remember the magazine, 4080 magazine. Mongo Nicole was a writer for those guys, and he did all kinds of things. He actually introduced me to those guys. So I went down to Los Angeles to go meet them in their pad, and they just played me a ton of music. I mean, man, I was blown away by, you know, all of the music and all the talent that they had. Now, these guys were, you know, they're street guys, but man, the talent was amazing. So what I did was, I don't know if you remember Cadillac Todd. You know, Cadillac Todd had some success in the 90s and early 2000s himself. So Cadillac Todd, I kind of connected them with Cadillac Todd, and Cadillac Todd started kind of managing the process of putting together their album and their single. So we put together the Way Too Real record. There was another record on there called Gangsta Waves, and we kind of promoted those two, and we got radio play, and Bam Bam Click started to take off. Now, right when we were starting to do their album, they had some challenges and some things kind of came up, and unfortunately, folks, you know, got locked up, and we didn't get a chance to bring to the world the entire Bam Bam Click. And since then, that folks, you know, some folks are still incarcerated, and a couple of the guys have passed away. So we never got a chance to really put that album out. So that was a challenge. So, but I love those guys. They're so talented. Their music was great, and some of the best records that me and my entertainment ever put out, and I was ever involved with as a producer, an executive producer, was the Fam Bam Click, and Cadillac Todd was great at helping put those projects together, put those records together. Now, when we talk about the Wet Boys, Sporty T, I met Sporty T in New Orleans, and he wanted to put together this project, the Wet Boys. And, you know, the thing about the record was so hot. But, you know, at the end of the day, it was a full disc record of Cash Money. He felt he was slighted. Sporty T felt he was slighted by Cash Money, and he was going to prove to them that they made a mistake. So, you know, with Soldier Rag, he basically redid Soldier Rag, and he just, you know, he was always talking about, you can say Hot Boys, but we the Wet Boys. Wet Boys put out the fire. So the whole album was banging. I mean, it was incredible. So people don't realize this. One of the last albums that DJ screwed before he passed away was the Wet Boys album. And the name of that was called The Wet Boys Get Wet, Get Screwed. So we dropped that album, Screw version, because we were one of, you know, when I say we, me and my entertainment, we were one of the very first labels, if not the first labels, that was putting out the regular version of an album and then doing the chop version at the same time and have them selling simultaneously. So we would chop these records, put them out at the same time, and we would have some really good success around the original version and the chop version selling at the same time, and it was hot. So, you know, rest in peace, like you said, to Sporty T. And it saddens me that he lost his life, especially the way he was murdered. But man, that Get Wet album and that Get Wet, Get Screwed album was so, both of those were so visionary and so hot. And he wound up doing the Soldier Rag song for Master P. You know, Master P had a compilation, and he took that record and he gave Sporty money to do a video and shoot it and do a single to that record. And it was, you know, it was a huge success for Sporty and helped drive even more sales to the Wet Boys album and the Screwed version that was, like I said, one of the last Screwed albums done by DJ Screw before he passed away.
Make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications, like, comment, share. Also go over to ugsforlife.com, download the entire archive, and check out new episodes on Apple Podcasts and Blog Talk Radio.